Hello, Mark Kulak. Maybe I might start going by Mark Nichols at some point. Houstonic.live, 2:54 p.m., Wednesday, March 19th, 2024. Short video here. This will just take a few minutes. And I'll let my tiles stream in the background here. So on today's Jonathan Cooey show, Gigahome Biological, and I'm just using video shorts as like a blog, I don't know, maybe it was a way I can transcribe them to make Substack posts, but this is what I've observed, the method that I can use to fastest produce content. Jonathan Cooey's show today on Gigahome Biological on Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, he put forward the possibility that, at least with respect to COVID-19, but possibly even more generally, it's possible that many vaccines are placebos. Many. Now, I don't know what the number is. 5%? 95%? 50%? I don't know. It's unlikely that the COVID vaccines are all real. Most of them are most likely placebos. And what was interpreted as, quote, bad batches, unquote, was really a sign of real. There's many people who've received all their COVID shots who are fine. Who are just absolutely fine, haven't felt anything, So there's also a possibility, I guess, that there could be different dosings being used. But I think many of them are placebos. So this way, you could always make a statement, or the statement could always be made, that most people who get them don't have adverse events, or adverse events are bad. It's interesting that even though there's supposedly no adverse events as vaccines are safe and effective, they track adverse events. Isn't that interesting? It's legal to track them, even though it's conspiracy to claim there's any adverse events. Now, at least historically, there hasn't been any, tracking of DNA or tissue or anything else with respect to vaccines, but I've also heard that many people who have long-term health problems, such as cancers, tend to be people who receive certain vaccines or certain numbers of vaccines. And it's interesting that vaccine records are usually tracked, although they're not centralized as well as they could be. I'm not saying they should be, but they could be. And usually people are biopsied when they have cancer to determine what type of cancer it is. So in a way, there's a very loose framework in place to correlate vaccines, which are probably real and not placebos, with cancers, and come up with a correlation. In other words, use the general population for methods of transfection and thus medical experimentation, identifying what types of cancers occur and how they occur, and maybe loosely correlating them with vaccines. Using the general population for medical experimentation. It's a pretty big idea. Now, it would explain why there could be people in the medical freedom community, and I'm in particular, I think Children's Health Defense would be a fantastic example, that maybe some people have started off wanting to fight against childhood vaccines, and at some point seem to have just dialed it back to, well, let's focus on the adjuvants. Let's focus on the MMR. Because they might have been told, look, you're going to lose this battle because in reality, most vaccines are not real. They're placebos. And there's other stuff put in there, the noise and so on, to obfuscate things. And there's an upside to this. The population's going to go down. There's going to be a massive global freeze in the future. We need to do this to save the human race. It's going to help with life extension, all this other stuff. So there's a lot of upside to you just playing along. And that's a possibility. In all honesty, I actually wish I knew how much that upside really was. I mean, if the statement really could be made, that it really is mathematically almost a certainty that there's no way for the human race to survive unless this stuff happens, well, I'm willing to have that discussion. And I think most reasonable people are. It's a horrible thing to think about, but I'm not just going to roll along with it either. And I just titled this video, and it's a video short, Are Most Vaccine Placebos Since World War II? So this idea of using vaccines, not actually to protect anyone against anything. It's there to use the population, to use people for the purposes of advancing knowledge of the human genome, advancing knowledge of cancers, advancing knowledge of the machinery of life. That's why all vaccines exist. I don't believe that happened, and that was the case before World War II. I've done videos about this before. One of the greatest medical catastrophes in the history of the United States was the yellow fever vaccine during World War II. We have no idea. There's been a lot of papers written that it wasn't as bad as they say it is, but I think it was a catastrophe. The United States almost couldn't even fight World War II at one point. We injured so many soldiers. And do you really think that they did that with placebos? I don't think so. I suspect that it was genuinely believed that the military was going to be actually protected and better off by taking those vaccines than not, which means they were most likely all real. And when that happened, I think there was some emergency meetings. They said, whoa. Why doesn't this work? And I think that internally the investigation was like whether or not vaccination works at all. And I suspect that sometime during World War II, a transition was made deep inside the, wherever you want to do, central planning, that vaccines don't work. However, a massive amount of gains can be had about the machinery of life and how the human genome works, because we're effectively injuring people with this intramuscular injection. So, right after World War II, a fantastic rollout of a new vaccine, the polio vaccine, started. I never understood this because polio never really was a thing. You can look at old newspapers. You'll find maybe 10 or 20 references in all U.S. newspapers on a yearly basis. On a yearly basis, all papers of word polio or poliomyelitis. It's what in the year like 1902, 1905. It's like never happened. It went up when certain like smallpox vaccines came out. And I think it was effectively a vaccine injury. So the best way to cure polio, which is a vaccine injury, is to roll out a bunch of placebos about a polio vaccine. And voila, no more polio. Isn't that a miracle? And what also happened during several things happened during the polio vaccine program, but in particular, it was, first off, it was a test of several different methods of vaccination. There was the oral vaccine. There was the injected vaccine. There's the Salk, Sabin, and Kaprowski. Now it's interesting. I'm very negative about Dr. Hilly Kaprowski of the oral vaccine. However, it was ingested as opposed to injected. So maybe Kaprowski just earned a couple of bonus points right there. You know, maybe that was his idea of, look, maybe you should ingest instead of inject. However, his rabies vaccine was totally injected, and that was one of the nastiest things ever. Though it was injected into the stomach, which is like, what the heck are you doing there? Really bizarre stuff. But anyways, I think that there were different types of administration tested, and I think a lot of them were placebos. And I think they were trying to determine what's the best way to go. They might have even wanted to ensure that the general population saw the injected one as preferable to the oral vaccine. Isn't that interesting? Because of all the vaccines that people can question, it's the oral one that the most books are written about. The oral polio vaccine from the 1950s. That's the one that people can disgrace. They want to keep steering people towards intramuscular injection, rolling up the sleeves and making your body and everything you have basically available for the state, for the central government, whatever it is, for this pursuit of understanding the human genome. I think the idea of placebos needs to be strongly considered, and it needs to be used when revisiting all vaccines, possibly have a certain number of placebos. They all involve this art since World War II. And if you want to get any FOIAs about this, if you want to get any insights about what's actually happening, you won't get it. Because since World War II, all of this has been protected by the United States Department of Energy and the Atomic Energy Commission because of a fear of nuclear weapons. In other words, the fear that the Earth could end at any time if someone does something bad and gets involved, gets hold of the wrong knowledge. That ridiculous fear is used to protect the usage of the general population of the world for medical experimentation, even if it results in killing people. This ties together so many things. It ties together concerns about pandemics. It ties together the FDA. It ties together, really, I still believe 9/11 was about the usage of the U.S. military, which was the most closely monitored population in the United States as far as medical data goes. And they all could have been forcibly, asked to take experimental gene therapy should there have been a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center. I still believe that's the main thing about 9/11. HIV was all about new forms of vaccination and accepting and pursuing, advancing these technologies. And I'm going to go so far as to say that right now the manic a dump of information about John F. Kennedy and the John F. Kennedy assassination is also somewhat connected to the falling apart of the narrative of just how serious, how all-encompassing the pursuit of the human genome is. The longest-running, most highly funded project in all of human civilization is the pursuit of understanding the human genome. I don't even know what's second. Everything else is a joke. So given the fact that John F. Kennedy is so central to this, someone dropped dead in the Senate, Estes Kefauver, who was a core person with respect to the updates with respect to the Food and Drug Administration 1962, 1963. Most people don't even consider the fact that John F. Kennedy's last political appointment was Estes Kefauver's wife to an ambassador role. I mean, the data's all over the place, but there's a desperate pursuit to make it about gangsters and guns and nukes and sex scandals and everything else. It's absurd. But I think that we're even pushing the needle, putting pressure on that. This stuff is all deeply connected. But when you consider the possibility that they made a decision and they've been protecting it against, really, behind DOE and Atomic Energy Commission ever since World War II. Remember, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Research Center, New York, was created on the days between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And its first director was an AEC, Atomic Energy Commission director. That's no joke. That's not a coincidence. This stuff is real. So this is just a few minutes. It's 13 minutes. That's more than I want to talk already. Think placebos. Look at all of the vaccine history. And I think it started right after World War II. And I think it was the yellow fever vaccine, the yellow fever catastrophe of the U.S. military in World War II. And this also ties in and supports the possibility that one of the reasons why one of the most criminal things you can do in all of Germany right now is to dare ask any questions about medical experimentation and the Holocaust. There you go. All right, guys. Back to work. Love you.